What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Wildcat Cave. We are deep into the offseason for the major sports, and video topics are getting harder and harder to come by. So today we're going to look ahead just a little bit towards the football season. Stoops and company are literally adding players by the day, and every time news comes out, I get a little more excited for football season. In this video, I'm going to give you guys my way too early season predictions for the Kentucky Wildcats. Before we jump into the predictions here, guys, just a few housekeeping things. Number one, like I said, topics are getting hard to come by, so keep dropping ideas of what you guys want to see in the comments. It's going to be a long summer, so throw out any idea you want. Also, go follow the channel on TikTok. It's just getting started, and it's a lot less serious over there, and we're just trying to get a laugh every now and then. It's a lot of fun. Go like that now. The link is in the description. And finally, a lot of you guys have asked me about the next live stream here on the channel. I've been waiting until the basketball roster was final. That way we can discuss how the offseason played out. As I understand it, the final day to withdraw from the NBA draft is May 31st. Of course, they can still add transfers after that date in the summer and stuff, but I think after that date, we're going to have a fairly solid idea of what the core of this roster will be. So the goal from the next live stream will be the week after May 31st, the first week of June. Mark your calendars for that week. I'm not sure of the day just yet, but I will let you guys know. Mark your calendars and be ready for that. So let's look ahead to the football season. Like I said, Stoops is adding people every single day through the portal, and it seems like a lot of the focus has been on the offensive line. They've added 5 new guys to the line from places like Alabama, Ohio State, and USC. And obviously, we don't know how these guys perform on the field just yet. But if these dudes were good enough to go to those schools, I'd say they're probably good enough to play for UK. O-line was obviously a huge issue for this team last season, especially when it came to the depth. Kentucky was rated as having the worst O-line of any Power 5 school in the country last season, so I'm glad to see Stoops really going after that position hard and recognizing that it needs fixed and then fixing it. Just by looking at the roster and the schedule, it feels like we have a pretty good chance at a good season. But there is a world where Kentucky is really good and still loses a lot of games. We have a pretty tough SEC schedule this year with the SEC East regulars of Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida, and then our SEC West opponents being at Mississippi State and Alabama at home. Not to mention a lot of those games happen back-to-back in sort of the middle towards the back half of the season. But the good news is if Kentucky can start off the season hot, they have a chance to rattle off a bunch of wins early. Also, I want to be clear. This is not my official prediction, and all of this is subject to change, and I will put out an official prediction video closer to the season. So starting off, we kick off the season with the 3 games against bad teams like we always do. This year, the opening game is Ball State. I don't know a ton about Ball State, but it doesn't matter. Should be an easy win, and we start the season 1-0. The second game is against my alma mater, EKU. Again, this should be a fairly easy win for Kentucky, but Walt Wells did have EKU playing really well last year. So much like Chattanooga in 2021 and Northern Illinois last year, where you look up at halftime and the bad team is still within reach of winning the game. It seems like under Stoops, we have one of those types of games every season, and I think that if UK is going to continue that trend this year, which I hope they don't, but if they do, it may just happen against EKU. And with them being an in-state team, it should make for a fun environment in the game for the fans and the people in the state. Richmond's only 20 minutes from Lexington, so I'd expect plenty of Colonels to turn out and enjoy the game. Also, remember what happened a few years ago when EKU came to Lexington, and they gave Stoops and Kentucky all they wanted, and UK literally squeaked out a win. Nevertheless, I expect UK to win, and we're starting off 2-0. Next on the chopping block are the Zips of Akron. Again, a team I don't know a single thing about. We're going to mark this up as a win, and the Cats start the season 3-0 before heading into SEC play. Now, this is a change to what we typically see in Kentucky's schedule. Normally, we get Mizzou or Florida within the first few games because the rule is one of your first 4 games has to be a conference opponent. Well, instead of those normal teams we play early that have a chance to beat us, this year we get Vanderbilt. Now, I know they beat us last year, and I think we all know that that was a fluke. This game is at Vanderbilt, though, and it's obviously not something we can overlook anymore, but we did literally take their best player, Ray Davis. I think this team comes out to prove that last year was a fluke and handles business in Nashville, and we start out 1-0 in the SEC and 4-0 on the season. Then on September 30th, the Florida Gators come to Lexington. Last time they visited, we end up storming the field, and it started the end of Dan Mullen's final year. Then, of course, last season, Will Levis embarrassed Anthony Richardson in the Swamp, and this will be a chance for Kentucky to beat Florida for the third year in a row for the first time since 1951. I think if they can do that, then Kentucky will kind of cement themselves as the second tier of SEC teams below Georgia and Alabama, along with teams like Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, and LSU. I think Billy Napier's done better with Florida's recruiting than Dan Mullen did, but I think he's still far away from what Florida used to be. So I'm going to pick Kentucky to win the game at home and start out 5-0. The next week is when things get really tough for Kentucky. Kentucky will have to travel to Athens and play Georgia. And even though we always play them really tough and the score's never as bad as people predict it to be, and I really want Kentucky to pull off this upset, I just don't think it's realistic. Georgia basically plays a different sport than not just Kentucky, but most teams in the country, if we're being honest. I give us about a 3% chance to win the game. So unfortunately, I think the Cats' winning streak ends here and we start out 5-1. The good news is, though, after that we get to play Mizzou. With this game being at home and us, I believe, being the better team, or being a better team than we were last season, I find it hard to see us losing this game. So it should be a solid bounce back game after going to Georgia, and we become bowl eligible in the first 7 games, and we're sitting at 6-1 here. And now we are on a bye week. We're halfway through the season. We're already bowl eligible with a really good record, and our only loss is probably to the best team in the country. Honestly, if it plays out this way, we're probably looking at being a top 10 team at this point, or at least fairly close to it. And then the hopes and dreams of an outside chance at the SEC championship start forming in our heads, and we begin looking at scenarios of New Year's Six bowls, possibilities, and who we're going to play. And as fun as all of that is, I think we get brought back to earth pretty quickly. Like always, after our bye week, we play Tennessee, which has really, really hurt Stoops teams for some reason in the past, because for whatever reason, we always play so slow and poor after a bye. Tennessee lost a ton of players last season, notably Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt, but I have been burned so many times by picking us to beat them. I just can't do it anymore. I for sure don't think that they're going to be as good as they were last season with that gimmicky lightning in a bottle style offense. But for some reason, we just cannot consistently beat them. And until we do, I have to pick against Kentucky here. Now, that may change before we play them. And the Vols proved that last season was a fluke. But right now, I'm going to pick Tennessee. But keep in mind, I did pick them to beat us in basketball twice this past season, and we swept them for the first time since 2015, so maybe that happens here too. After that, we travel to Mississippi State, which is always a tough game for Kentucky. Will Rogers had huge numbers last season, and he's back for the Bulldogs this year. Normally, the home team wins this game each year, but Mississippi State beat us in Lexington last season, so I think we return the favor. With Mike Leach passing, they have a new coach this year, and I think Leach was a huge reason for their success that they have had here recently. This game could easily go either direction, but for now, I'm going to take Kentucky to win, and we're sitting at 7-2 on the season. After the gauntlet of Georgia, Mizzou, Tennessee, and Mississippi State, we finally get an easy home game against Alabama. That is a hard stretch of games for Stoops and the team. It begins and ends with what is probably the best 2 teams in the country. Obviously, I think we lose to Alabama, but it'll be fun to have them in Lexington. The one thing going for Kentucky in this game is that it is going to be in mid-November, and with us being the farthest north team in the SEC, Bama's not used to really playing in a lot of cold weather games. I still think we lose, but the weather could play a big factor for us. Then in the final of the SEC game of the year, we have to travel to Columbia, South Carolina. Last year, they kind of stole the game from Kentucky with Will Levis being hurt and that's when they really kind of figured themselves out and actually went on a good run to end the season. I truly, truly believe that Stoops hates Shane Beamer, and honestly, I kind of do too. And they do have Spencer Rattler back at quarterback one, but I admittedly don't know much else about the team this season. So to me, they're a less talented team than Kentucky. They're a lesser program than Kentucky right now. Playing at South Carolina is always tough, and they have that stupid sandstorm song they play with the rooster crowing and all that junk. I think this game is much like Vandy and Mississippi State, where they beat us last year, even though we were the better team. And this will be one that Stoops has circled on the calendar. This is just one we could lose, but I'll pick Kentucky to win. I just think that they got hot last year, and what they had going isn't really sustainable. Then to finish off the season, we will play the Governor's Cup. This year we play at Louisville. I've said over and over that I think Jeff Brom will do better than Satterfield did, but it is his first season and he's walking into an absolute mess. I think Kentucky wins this one pretty easily. We finish the regular season 9-3. Now 9-3 is a really good season for Kentucky, and I can recognize that is a fairly optimistic outlook on everything here, and that has Kentucky winning 3 of the 4 close games with Tennessee, Mississippi State, Florida, and South Carolina. I mean, honestly, instead of going 3-1 in those games, it's very possible we end up 1-3 and finish like 7-5, or even drop another game and go 6-6. The line between bad, good, and great is so thin for a team like Kentucky, who is still climbing the SEC ranks and hasn't established themselves just yet. That makes it incredibly hard to really predict how they're going to end up, especially in the transfer portal era. There's just so many new faces on all these teams. You can never really gauge how effective new guys will be until they really start playing. I've also said here that Kentucky usually loses one that they shouldn't, and they win one that they shouldn't. So honestly, who knows how the season's going to end up, but I, for one, will go into the season just as excited as ever. That is going to wrap up this video, guys. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel this summer and like this video if you're as excited as I am for football. Let me know your predictions down in the comments. Head on over to the new TikTok account and follow us there. Drop idea videos below as well, and stay tuned for the next live stream. I'll see you guys in the next video. Go Cats!